Yeah, by the way, can you hear me okay? I'm not sure like how my audio is.
Yeah, am I coming in weird?
No, yours is fine. How about mine?
Yeah, it's good. It's
Okay.
interesting because your avatar has these kind of gratuitous movements. So it seems like you're moving your head a lot more than you probably really are.
Oh, no, I actually am moving my head because I'm looking at
Oh,
another
really?
screen as well.
It is really amusing though. I can definitely see where this technology is going.
Hmm. I think, yeah, yeah. I think Zoom, obviously, them not being like they're probably kind of late to this game. Like I think Snapchat probably does it a lot better, and there's some like Asia-based ones that probably do a lot better, but hopefully
Uh,
Zoom improves.
hey, Jason.
Yeah, the
Okay,
only down.
so
Oh,
go ahead.
go ahead.
Go
Oh, the
ahead.
only downside of these avatars is you can't like if I hold up something, then it's not gonna show anything.
Oh, right. Object recognition.
Yeah, whereas
Yeah,
the YouTube link I showed,
Test,
right?
test.
It's only his face, whereas you could still everything else is normal. Like, you can hold up his hands,
Oh,
everything's like normal.
pretty
sorry,
crazy.
my I don't know if you guys can hear me. I can't hear you guys anymore. I don't know what happened. Sorry. One sec.
It's okay. Yeah, we can
There
hear
we go.
you.
You can hear me?
Yeah. Yeah, you're
Okay.
coming in good.
We're back in business now. Sorry about that.
Awesome. Do you want us to refer to you on the podcast as Back the Bunny? Because I totally
Yeah.
good with me. Okay.
Yeah. If you could, just for like, the I don't know, persona and naming consistency. It just seems to be the name people are knowing me by now.
I like it. I also like the way you're doing. I mean, I saw some of the consensus pics, and afterwards you would add the bunny image over it in kind of this funny way. I really like that.
Yeah, I was debating whether or not to do that. I don't know if you guys saw, I posted even a thing, like a little poll. It was like, should I reveal my face? I'm not sure if I see the down, like there are downsides, obviously, but they seem limited to the upsides. And then surprisingly, I was expecting most people to sort of selfishly say, yeah, show your face, just because why not? Like, it's the curiosity in a way would be satiated, but they were actually really constructive and like, don't do it. Like, we know you for like what you have to say. Seeing your face doesn't add any value. Like it's not has anything to do with anything, and it might only present downside. And I was like, yeah, I kind of agree with that. I almost ended up feeling narcissistic in a way for wanting to show it. And then I realized, like, you can dox in real life, like meet people. I'm not going to be not going to be schizo without, meeting people in real life and saying hi, who I am. But at the same token, like leading with your face, I just kind of realized maybe it's not necessary, at least for like my angle. So
Yeah, I
Makes
like
sense.
that. Um, okay, well, why don't we get this show on the road then? Um, so welcome
Oh,
to the latest episode of 2degens. Today we're excited to have on the provocative, enlightening writer, thinker, crypto builder known as Back the Bunny. And we'll have a lot of topics to cover with him today, including his story, how he got into crypto, some of his writings. He's a prolific personality on Twitter, and as well as diving into the product that he's helping to build called RabbitX. So maybe just to start off here, since you just got back from consensus and I was feeling a bit of FOMO, be curious to get your takeaway on how it went and anything interesting that you saw while you were there.
yeah, no, my great to be here. By the way, I'm glad you guys asked for me to be on, and I appreciate the kind words. Yeah, consensus was my first crypto conference actually. I've never gone to anything in real life before, and yeah, we had an opportunity to kind of go there and at side events. We didn't actually have like a booth at consensus proper. It's rather expensive. And so wanted to just kind of go there, get a feel for things. And we got a presence at a site at an event in the area. And I got to speak at one there too. And it was really, it was good. It was great. It was as honestly as rewarding and interesting as I could have hoped. Met a lot of like just really competent, capable people, like very few beginners. I was expecting to have a lot more just like rudimentary conversations around what perps, perpetual futures even are, or just certain crypto concepts. And most people seem to have like a bulwark of understanding on like core stuff. So I could like delve into more like advanced things. Um, and yeah, just the vibes, energy were great. The panel I was on, the questions were surprisingly good. I was expecting more like, VC fluff culture questions, like kind of like the softer stuff. And it was more like involved around regulatory approaches and long-term views based on the US environment and kind of like the ethos around what we're building. So the quality of like a person and content was really positive. And Austin was a cool city too. Love to go back there. It seems like it's small enough where you can stick out, but it's big enough to be, to matter if you can have some kind of visibility there. And yeah, I want more. I can't wait to go to the next one. So overall, a good ROI for like the investment time and trip, especially if you're going to do it more in the guerrilla style, which is what we did. We didn't do the formal event. We did more side stuff and going to evenings and what have you. So great stuff though. 10 out of 10 would do it again.
Yeah, that sounds great. I feel like that's one of the things I've learned about going to some crypto events, NFT NYC, Consensus. It's just like the action is always at the side events and the parties, and so that makes total sense.
Totally.
Yeah, it's great to see also kind of take a pulse of the industry and see what everyone's up to, see if, it's a lot of TradFi folks coming in or, where are the folks, where is the industry moving? Yeah, I've been to like Token 2049 last year in Singapore. It felt like it was, very, very kind of institution focused. I'm curious to hear your take on Consensus. Was it a lot of more kind of grassroots projects, or was it a lot of kind of well-funded companies, or was it a mix?
So I went to the actual Consensus conference, like walked around it just one day. Um, and I would say it was more on the funded basis. Yeah, if I had to kind of speculate, I would assume most of them probably had VC backing in some respect. Um, and I don't say that like disparagingly at all. Like I just say it like they seemed more polished, I suppose, in a way that would make me think there's more formality there. Um, but at the conference itself, and this is why I just don't feel the ROI just seems a little suspect there for how much they're charging, which is like 17K, I think, for a booth. And then you have to get swag to, you have to give away something that while you're there basically, and that's probably going to cost you another 2-3K. So it's not outlandish to say, I think, having a presence there, formally a presence there would cost like 20K. And while there, it did seem like there was just sort of a sea of vendors. It was kind of hard to distinguish, like it was like booth, 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 and a couple stood out to me based on personal interest, like the Starknet booth did, but for obvious reasons, like RabbitX uses Starknet. Some market making shops did, because they kind of tie into our order book approach. But yeah, it did seem like they were polished, and most had formal backing. Again, I'm speculating there, and it did seem hard for them though to stick out in that kind of environment. And that's why the guerrilla side event thing, seems to be where you can really stand out and maybe get the most bang for your buck.
Cool. Well, maybe we can rewind a bit and just talk a little bit about your crypto origin story first. And by way of that, I'm also a bit curious how you chose that Twitter handle. I mean, I've heard the explanation, I think, on a podcast of the Vietnam farmer example, but if you could also explain that too.
Yeah, totally. So on the origin story, I've been like crypto friendly, for quite a while. I had a roommate who was into Bitcoin when it was like $7, and he was kind of zany, and I thought it was cool. I just didn't think it was like I didn't view it from like the ideological lens. he wasn't particularly political. He just thought it was cool tech. He was very much in it from the tech lens. And I didn't really appreciate it yet in that perspective. And I didn't have, you could say, the political leanings I do enough to where I saw that and realized what it represented for like financial systems in a positive way. But I accepted Doge for like utility payments, like literally the second month it came out. This, I think November 2013 or November 2014, whichever year Doge came out, like 2 months after it came out, I accepted it for like utility payments.
That's awesome.
But yeah, but I didn't, and it wasn't like a huge amount, so it's not like I got rich off that at all. But I didn't respect them. I didn't view it. I just viewed them as tokens bouncing around, you know. So between Bitcoin and Doge, I'm like, well, the meme is better for Doge, and I think it has more staying power, and I'll take that one. That was the, you know, the amount of thought I put into it, because I didn't really see them as like technological tools. I just thought they were tokens bouncing around. And then in 2020, like early mid 2020, I learned about Filecoin. And when I learned about Filecoin, I took a step back and was like, well, this is like a real company. Like this provides cloud services, basically. Like AWS is a real company. Like this is a real thing I can look at. You know, I was a technology stock investor. I still am, just much less so. And when I saw them as actually things providing real services with economic value is when the scales fell from my eyes. Like, okay, this is serious. I need to learn more about this. And then I was just completely immersed and got more and more down the rabbit hole of needing to understand how things are working and, you know, what was being built here. And the more I've learned, the more I've just been like, this is where you got to be. Like, this is, I can't imagine working anywhere else or being involved in anything else. Like, this is just on a personal level, professional level, it's the most interesting space I think that exists. Maybe AI is competitive with that, you know? And so, yeah, it's been just a self-learning kind of autodidact journey from there. And has kind of led me to the spot where I am now with just my understanding of things, what have you. But that was like kind of my origin story. And it was mostly like economically rooted. And then as I learned more about the technology of it, I then started to see more and more what it represented for on the political side, you know, of things. And I don't like presenting it as a political object, but it inherently is because of what it disintermediates. You know, you can't build new financial infrastructure that circumvents banks and sanctions and not act like you are inherently building something that also has political implications. And then as I just, you know, I am very aligned with what it's accomplishing from that end too, just on a personal level. I think the only reason things weren't built that way were technological shortcomings, frankly. Like, you know, for the very same reason that Blockbuster came before Netflix, it's not that the Blockbuster model was better. It's just that we didn't have the technology to stream videos into your house, right? And then when we got the technology to stream videos into your house, clearly Netflix is a superior model. That's how I view crypto. Like now that we have peer-to-peer, you know, internet, and, you know, everyone has a computer or can get access to a computer that can basically run a full Ethereum node and do this stuff, like this is obviously the superior model. Like anytime you can disintermediate something, you remove someone out of the supply chain, you inherently add more margin or reduce their margin, add more value. More value is accrues to the users, you know, as you move people in the supply chain, so to speak. And it disintermediates those things and, you know, retains more value for us. So it's obviously the superior, I think, economic model for financially. Politically, I love what it accomplishes, and I think it upsets exactly the right people. And technologically, I just think it's the coolest space to be in. So, yeah.
I really like the Netflix versus Blockbuster analogy. However, there are kind of a lot of naysayers out there that kind of would point to like the media talking about money laundering or tax avoidance, or a lot of kind of negative sides of crypto. Like, what are your thoughts, or what would you say to them about the kind of perceived negatives?
So I'd say that none of those are peculiar to crypto at all. What you're describing are behaviors that have gone on since tax collection and crime have been things. You know, to this day, like the US, like cash is still far and away the preferred tool for criminals. Like, but tax avoidance has been going on long before, DeFi happened, and it'll keep going on for the next thing too, whatever the next thing after DeFi is. So these are just inherent human behavioral sets that happen in economies. Like this has nothing to do with crypto. Like what you're basically doing is trying to smear crypto with these behaviors as if they're somehow these novel new things. And they're just not. Like it's just these behaviors will happen in any like technological domain, especially when finances are involved. And I'd also say, like, if your concern is transparency and wanting to monitor things, like in some ways, I'd be like, you guys should love blockchains and like, government agencies. You can track stuff. You can see these movements, and you can see them in a way where you don't need a warrant. You don't need these kind of typical tools where these networks are opaque and then you can get access to, but it takes a longer time, like, and they have tools that they're using to try and catch, miscreants and stuff like that, like Coinalysis, works closely with a lot of federal agencies. I'm sure a lot of ones do. So one, it makes things more transparent and more accessible, and in a way that you can also see if you're, someone in law enforcement or government. So I'm not sure why you would dislike that. It's much more visible than cash. And two, like none of these behaviors are unique to crypto. So I don't, if you're trying to attribute these negative things to this space that has been around really for like 5-6 years, effectively, like you're just being, I think at best you're being naive, and at worst you're being just you're just being disingenuous, and you just don't like crypto, and you're trying to pretend like these things are a result of crypto, and they're not.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of what you're saying, and I think the fact that crypto is so transparent makes, I mean, I would almost kind of half jokingly say that in the future only honest actors will use crypto, whereas only maybe states, governments, and people who are trying to launder money, only they will resort to using the traditional finance rails, because those are kind of much more difficult to trace, ironically.
Yeah, totally. Like if you wanted to be, next level schizo about it, you could say like, maybe the CIA is Satoshi, and creating this creation that seems libertarian also makes all of our transactions completely transparent. Like, I'm not taking that stance, but it's just a funny one. That's like, if you want to view this from like does this help the state in some way, at least monitor behavior? Like it does. So yeah, them acting like the shadowy supercoder like comment is just like, it couldn't be more untrue with a by nature permissionless, completely open sourced, visible chain where everyone agrees on the behaviors and what's happening, and really kind of nothing is hidden. So from that lens, it's, if you're anti-crime, I mean, hey, welcome aboard. I'm glad you're a DeFi fan then.
It's one of our good friends who we've had on the pod a few times, active investor, Steven. That's also his kind of best theory, is that it might be a deep state or a CIA thing. And we've had plenty of spirited debates on that. But I actually just to build a little bit on what George was saying, and I remember you mentioned it, I might be misspeaking here, but I remember you mentioned you were like a published writer in the past for different I think maybe like more political or like politics related publications. So I'd just be curious to get your perspective on how that media machine works as a published writer now that you're in crypto too.
Yeah, no, you remember correctly. I've written for a handful of them, mostly financial, but a couple political though as well. We're not talking like Washington Post or like New York Times though. I'm not like that level, but like they're relatively prominent, like B tier publications, maybe, if you want to consider like New York Times A tier. And like it's not terribly like sophisticated, at least on a lot of these levels. Like they really are just commenting on, or they want stories focused on, the zeitgeist and very temporal things that are happening at this point in time that frankly probably won't even matter 2 weeks from now. It's weird to look back and think like the thing that like seems important now, like ask yourself, will this matter in 2 weeks, let alone a month? The answer is almost always no, almost always. But it's like, it's a very like myopic, what's going on now? How can we make this little, near term thing seem important enough to generate clicks and get you to read something? I wasn't like a staff writer though, where I had to just generate content to generate content. Like, thank God that'd be just heart-wrenching to me. Because I like when I write something, I want it to be because I have something to say. I don't want it to be just like I'm trying to regurgitate, just share something that happened or someone else's opinions. So I was like an opinion writer, and I would reach out when I had like something I wanted to comment on. And if it was framed along the like the political lineage of what that paper was, yeah, they were interested in hearing the pitch, and I would pitch it and publish it and kind of go from there. So that's the extent of my involvement. It wasn't like on like the editorial floor or like hearing like the machinations of some kind of plotting and we're going to not include something. I saw a little bit into that, but it's not like super nefarious. It's just really low attention span. How do we make something unimportant seem important? How do we get clicks and push stuff out in a way that consistently gets people reading our stuff? I was on the opinion side, and it was always when I had something to say, I'd reach out, pitch it, and present from there.
Right. I mean, maybe we can move on to some of the stuff you've written on Twitter, because it's pretty clear to me that you have a lot of resonance. And I remember when George first shared with me, it was your thread, I think, on the correlation between warfare and business. I was like, whoa. And we both were just like kind of geeking out over it. So I would love if maybe you just start there and just tell us a little bit how that thread came to you, and just kind of describe it a little bit for our listeners.
Yeah, totally. I'm really glad it did. It was, and this kind of goes into the Vietnam farmer question you asked a bit ago that I didn't touch on, and I'll touch on here. I was reading some stuff, and a lot of like the ideas, like, or thoughts that I have usually come on like sometimes on walks or from listening to like podcasts and hearing things be discussed, and like abstracting that into thinking like, where else does this apply, or where else could this apply? And I was reading some stuff related to warfare, and then some business analysis too. And then it clicked that way back when I'd read some reflections on like how warfare and business were correlated in some way. And that just, I don't know why on that walk, it kind of resonated with me like, wait a minute, like DeFi has a lot of parallels to business. And, considering the viewpoint I have with like how it's going to be viewed as from a power paradigm and the game theoretic one, I was like, this probably actually has a lot of similarities with the business to warfare to DeFi to warfare thing, because it's a lot of the similar like business concepts, like the financial concepts will apply here. And so I started looking into generations of like, formally more like generations of war more closely than the business ones. And then looking at the DeFi ones and realizing there's a trend here with like, the simple early stage DeFi stuff of like, Bitcoin first coming out, and all you could do is just send transactions to each other, very simple, basic stuff. Very similar to like, line and column warfare. There's not much strategy. You just literally soldiers just ram into each other. There's not much sophistication there, but it accomplishes what you want to get done. And, as business and, war advanced from there, DeFi did as well with getting more sophisticated with, the smart contract and Ethereum and stuff. I'd encourage, if anyone's curious, to read the threads, because it's kind of a lot to get into all the generational comparisons in here. But basically, suffice to say that like warfare is a leading indicator for business, and then it typically adopts new novel strategies because it's in the most adversarial domain you can be in, and a lot of those strategies end up being very analogous to what businesses end up doing down the line. So again, it's a leading indicator in that respect. And on the DeFi front, I was like, I bet you this is also something of a leading indicator to pull from here. And that's what the series Generations of War, Crypto, and Business try to just kind of parallelize and then predict like, okay, what do I think is going to happen as the US takes the next step, and as as we kind of see this thing evolve. So that was the inspiration of it. And then just kind of thinking how crypto might follow a similar path, which I really do think it will. And which leads to the Vietnam farmer meme, which I'm really, I want us to adopt more as like as a calling card, as like kind of a motivational signal, because, and as a positive thing too, because the US has been, extremely obviously dominant wars. Like that's why it has the empire that it has largely. You know, it won the most consequential war of our life of the last 100 years, and set up financial infrastructure in a way that really benefited it. You know, with like the World Bank and the IMF and I forget the agreement where they pegged the currencies to each other. I forget the name of that one. But you know, they created a scenario, a world that really behooved them. They had an extremely strong economy. They had, you know, were set up to do really well. And yeah, and they've dominated ever since. But like, and on the war front too, they've just been the dominant power. But you notice like what wars the U.S. has lost in the last, say, like I think, you know, 50 years or so, we'll say. The first one was Vietnam. You know, how did it lose to rice farmers? You know, like it nominally, it didn't. I mean, it certainly wreaked a lot of havoc for the North Vietnam and the Viet Cong, but like ultimately they lost. Like this vastly superior power, like eventually just kind of quit and left. And it was guerrilla warfare. You know, it was like a huge diffuse amount of guerrillas and, you know, rice farmers, you know, more passionately fighting with a more dedicated cause against a larger, superior adversary. And then another war, you know, that we recently, you know, basically lost is like in Afghanistan. We just left, we just quit. Like, why? Because like we weren't accomplishing anything. Like we weren't succeeding in what we wanted to do. And eventually, like, you know, you just exhaust a larger foe that way. There's a Henry Kissinger line that I referenced a couple of times in there. It's the traditional army or the state army, sorry, I'm going to botch this. I can't believe I'm forgetting the quote. It loses if it's, so the state army loses if it doesn't win. The guerrilla wins if he doesn't lose. So it's basically just persistence that is eventually like your goal has to just be just don't die and keep fighting existing. And you know, the larger foe eventually kind of just sort of gives up if it doesn't, you know, if it's not critical to their survival. And so again, that's guerrilla warfare again. So like the Vietnam farmer inspiration is like, hey, listen, like the US couldn't defeat a relatively concentrated group of guerrillas in rice fields, and they knew where they were, and eventually it was still too much. Like we are a distributed global network that has cryptography, AGI, and anonymity tools, and is extremely well funded. Like don't worry, like you can't basically, like you really, it's for me, it's almost like impossible to see how we could not win, viewed from that lens, because this is like the ultimate guerrilla warfare and the most distributed, sophisticated network you could think of. And to top it off, we have all the intellectual talent. I don't think the best talent is really going to work for the US. I think they're coming into the space, into the AI space. So that's the inspirational part, I guess, of my, you know, I'm kind of black pilled and doomer near term, like under 10 years. But then over a longer timeline, I think it's impossible for us to lose. So that's the generations of war thing and the Vietnam farming.
So I'm looking at your tweet, right? And just to kind of reemphasize your quote, the conventional army loses if it does not win. The guerrilla, which crossed off, we switch it for the Vietnam DeFi farmer wins if he does not lose.
Yeah, so that's the meme. You found it. Yeah, I tweaked that one with Kissinger.
So what do you I guess, do you feel like DeFi wins simply by existing, then, right? If as long as it continues, that's kind of in the analog of winning, or does winning mean something else to you?
Yeah, I mean, I would say yes. Like our continual existence is like definitionally a win, because that means the infrastructure continues to persist. And I'd also say like these regulatory bodies, like, and then drawing a comparison to the US military again, like the US military has been historically extremely successful against large centralized foes. Who do we beat? Like we beat the USSR, we beat Germany, we beat Mexico. Like, you know, we beat countries well. We beat other countries' formal armies in traditional combat very effectively. But again, who do we lose to? Rice farmers and goat herders, right? The SEC, and drawing a parallel here, the SEC is built to go after Goldman Sachs. It's built to go after Deutsche Bank. It's built to go after Fidelity and Barclays, like large central banks and institutions where you have a compliance department we can speak to, you have a CEO we can talk to, you have an investor relation, like, traditional basic stuff. That's traditional warfare, traditional company. They are not built to go after tens of thousands of developers distributed across the globe that, again, are armed with cryptography, AGI, very well capitalized, and are just frankly more competent than they are. Like, the resources just aren't there. And again, like, viewed from that lens, it's like we should try to be constructive and amiable and, exist in these places peacefully. But like, don't worry, like, they can't stop that. Like, and that's kind of my angle here with this warfare analogy. Like, this is a Vietnam farmer, on steroids and then some. And when you realize what it would take to actually stop us and stop DeFi, you'd have to go like China tier draconian and then some. Like you'd have to go like North Korea tier draconian. You'd have to like turn off the internet in certain parts of your country. You'd have to make like buying a laptop, buying a computer the same thing as like, registering to buy a gun or something, like something you have to get government approval to get. That's what you really have to do if you think you have a modicum of hope to like actually limit these peer-to-peer networks. For the very same reason you can go to the Pirate Bay right now and download whatever you want, torrent whatever you want. Like, they've wanted to stop that for a long time, but you can't stop that because peer-to-peer networks are pretty goddamn unstoppable, right? And this is like the god mode of peer-to-peer networks. And so from that end, it's like, yeah, we just need to keep existing and surviving, and go to jurisdictions that are friendly to us. I think that'll matter more and more over time. But yeah, just don't lose. That's really it. Just keep existing. Don't die, and you'll be okay. And also, relish the fact that the resources, for these Western countries, they're just not there. So
it's funny you mentioned you use the term Vietnam farmer because and the 10,000 developers distributed globally, because a lot of them are actually in Vietnam.
Are they really? Yeah, Southeast Asia represents hard, so that's good to know.
Yeah, we'd love to have you out here at some point. Both, I mean, I'm in Taiwan right now, but both George and I have spent some time working in Vietnam too. And as you were talking about the Vietnam farmer concept, I started to think like it would be a really kind of funny NFT collection or something. And
That's a
also,
good idea. Yeah.
yeah.
I should meme that harder in that way. I'm being I'm being too I'm not monetizing that well, huh? Yeah, like having an NFT kind of approach or a coin and having it be like, a calling card for us or something. You can make it like fun and cool too. Like, Vietnam farmers are like always smiling in all the pictures I see. They just look like happy, inspiring people. Like, you can't look at them and hate them, So yeah.
I mean, I kind of have, or not a theory really, but my observation on people who really build a strong following online, which I think you're among them now, is it's just this ability to really create memes and to propagate these memes. I mean, I think Vietnam Farmer is a good example. And I also, it sort of dovetails with this tweet that you'd sent out. I mean, I just want to read it because I think it's really good, and it helps me wrap my head around something, which is, you said like, meme coins concerns is a similar pattern to how people thought the internet was mostly a scam because the tech was originally used for porn. And every new tech will have bad optics to contend with. This is not a solvable problem. So I would just be curious to get your take a bit on maybe that, and just in general how you see the power of memes within crypto.
Yeah, totally. I just sent that out today, actually, maybe a couple hours ago. And I have a Spaces event this Friday with Nick Carter and a crypto law review, who's a really prominent guy in the legal space. And something he brought up was like this perception, like, is our perception something that is being used against us? And it was kind of along the lines of what you see here with the DeFi llama guy, OX and GMI, who I'm responding to, where I'm like, this meme coin concern, like, one, is something we've seen before, and two, it's not a solvable problem, if you want to even call it a problem, because this is innate, as you can see, in like, as new tech gestates, like, criminals and kind of shady people are usually first adopters unsurprisingly so, right? Like, who would be most motivated to go out on that S curve and say, this novel new tech, I maybe can use it in some way, and maybe it's not the most savory way. And then detractors try to use that to disparage the tech, as that's the only thing it's good for. And obviously that's not the case. And it's just like this same pattern, of like people looking at Pepe coin and Doge and like, oh, this is all crypto is. Like, it's not. Like, either you're incurious or you just hate crypto, and that's just an easy thing to point to. So, and like, we're building permissionless anonymous systems. Like, you shouldn't want to stop people from doing that and having fun and pumping whatever, because like, we're building a system that also allows that, right? Like, we're building something where you can't censor someone's ability to do that. So obviously, if you're building an uncensorious open platform, you should expect to see stuff like that, right? You should expect to see Ponzi's. You should expect to see people in the wild, wild west of the fourth industrial revolution doing some silly shit, and that's fine. Like, it's not, I almost view it like playfully, like the same way you would, like, if you had a kid growing up and he scrapes his knees and gets into some adorable trouble that's nothing serious. It's like, that's fine. That's what a kid is supposed to do. Like, this is what a new system is supposed to do. It's supposed to, cause some mischief here and there. So yeah, it's one of those things where it's like, this is not a solvable problem. We've seen it in the past. I also don't think it's a problem per se, even to be solved. And just kind of roll with it, like, the mimetic concept of like people rallying around shared beliefs or ideas is a strong thing. And Pepe coin is that right now, and whatever. Like, we'll probably won't even be talking about it 2 weeks from now, right? Because that's about the life cycle of these things. And yeah, that was kind of the impetus behind that, is embrace the open permissionless system that you are helping build. And if you don't like something, or if you think it's not something that should be in this space, like, build something more attractive or with better aligned economic incentives to make that not appealing. Like, build something that makes the thing you don't like a moot point. We're trying to build things that operate around shared economic incentives and motivating people to act in the way that maybe you like. So motivate them. Build something that maybe is better or gets more attention than Pepe coin. That's kind of my approach to that, is to not demonize it, but to recognize it as just part of the gestation cycle of new tech, and embrace the silliness and build cool shit in the meantime. And people who want to smear the meme coins is what crypto is, whatever. We know that's not true, and they just want to hate on us anyway. So don't think twice about it.
Yeah, it's interesting you bring up the word, shady. And then what I started to think was, well, shady oftentimes is only relative to what people consider is in the light, right? Or what is not shady. And so much of that is very normative. And then you'd also wrote this thing about how, in a way, laws are a meme, and if the collective believes in them, then they matter. And I think there's just something really powerful about that. But I mean, back to what you're saying about building. I mean, maybe this is a good time for us to dive into what you guys are building over at RabbitX. Maybe you could just start and give us kind of a big picture description of what you're doing and where you see the opportunity is.
Yeah, totally. So, consistent with that, like, open permissionless kind of ethos, that's what we're building, and we really believe in that. I deeply believe in that. And, we want it to be, the premier derivatives platform, not only in DeFi, but hey, we have aspirations beyond that. So, we're aiming very high, and you shoot for the stars and you hopefully still land on the moon, right? But we are a perpetuals DEX on Starknet, with a model somewhat similar to DYDX in terms of how we operate. We use order book liquidity. We use Starknet for settlements for withdrawals and deposits. And yeah, we have been on mainnet for about 8 weeks now. Really encouraging volume too. We cleared like about 130 million in volume over 30 days during mostly closed mainnet. We hit an all-time high of like 30 million in volume or so, like maybe a week ago. So the adoption's been strong. We're onboarding more market makers, and just continuing to try to scale liquidity, because that's really kind of the kingmaker in this space. And yeah, we're trying to build, like, I mean, right now it's crypto perpetuals. So our markets are Bitcoin, ETH, Solana, Lido, Doge, Arbitrum, ARB, and that's 6 markets right now. I think that's all of them. And we're going to expand. Like we're always thinking of new markets to add, and we're going to eventually, a part of our phase 2 is actually going beyond just crypto. We want to be FX, forex trading, options trading, commodities. So we want to be derivatives for a whole gamut of financial instruments, and all with that very permissionless, open, sort of ethos always present in what we're building here. So we have a really great team, super smart, builders with like TradFi backgrounds, really strong technical and underpinnings. And yeah, I would absolutely bet on us. I mean, I am betting on us, right? But even if I didn't like work for Rabbit, I would be extremely bullish on what we're trying to build and do. And yeah, that's the goal.
I noticed that you guys are directly on mainnet in contrast to some of the other competitors like Synthetics, where Quenta is on Optimism, and then GMX is on Arbitrum. I'm curious, what your thoughts are on that. Is it to kind of launching on mainnet, and do you guys intend to stay only on mainnet or be on like L2 as well?
Oh, so we're technically a Starknet project. So and we chose Starknet we chose like ZK Starks for a very specific reason. Like technologically, they just have a lot of structurally superior elements to them compared to like optimistic rollups, which do have some like odd shortcomings that I think will probably matter eventually, especially with like the fraud proofs and the 7-day holds for transferring assets. Technically a fraudulent transaction could post on an optimistic rollup. That is like technologically, like cryptographically, I should say, not feasible on ZK rollups. And Stark rollups specifically have some unique advantages to them too. So we really picked like a layer 2 that we think is primed to, be the best tech that crypto has, hopefully for quite a while. And so the deposits, go ahead.
Yeah, so I'm curious. So basically, for the less technical, you guys are using AL2, but from the user perspective, they don't really know what's going on. They can just be on mainnet and be interacting with it, but in the background, it's actually layer 2. Is that what you're saying? Because I'm not that familiar with Starknet either.
Yeah, no, good question. Yeah, you're mostly right. So the deposits happen on mainnet on ETH layer 1, and the collateral is held in a smart contract on ETH layer 1. And right now our order book is off chain. So again, very similar to DYDX's model, if you're familiar with it. And then market makers like, professional ones, like Wintermute and others, are then like, structuring an order book like a real TradFi institution would, for buys and sells and liquidity. And there's a reason why the order book is like the de facto main form of liquidity for basically the entire financial world. The AMM is a great crypto primitive, but it has a lot of shortcomings, and is kind of one of those things that we use right now, sort of for the same reason I say, Blockbuster versus Netflix. We don't have the scaling ability right now to like support the throughput that an order book requires on chain. So that's why it's off chain right now. But we want to bring that on chain. That's very much in our roadmap. And the AMM is kind of a simple, low information way to facilitate that, but it has some shortcomings with how that works. So anyway, the order book's off chain. The trades, when you place them, are being affected on an order book with a market maker. You can go up to 20 times leverage on us. It's gasless trading, so you don't pay any gas when you place orders. We have objectively the lowest fees in the space. And again, I say that objectively. If you compare our fees, I haven't seen any that are lower than us. I think our highest fee is 7 basis points for opening and closing, and that's if you're a taker order. If you're a maker, you don't pay anything. It's totally free on that. As compared with like GMX, which is like 10 basis points both ways, and there's some other fees in there too. So, and then when you want to, so where Starknet comes into play, kind of to speak to your question, when you are making a withdrawal, we use Starknet as a messaging system, so to speak. like when you bridge something, you lock an asset in a contract that's on L1, and you send a message to layer 2 saying, hey, this asset is held here, mint this, WBTC or WETH or this derivative asset on the other layer. We're using it kind of in a similar way. When you do a withdrawal, the layer 2 StarkNet communicates down to our L1 contract, which is housing your collateral, saying, hey, user who owns this collateral has requested this withdrawal, release it, and they take it back out of that contract. So StarkNet is a layer 2 like messaging system, so to speak, for us right now. And it's going to be more and more integral, though, as we continue to grow, because StarkNet's scaling too, frankly. We're going to build it to the point where you can do deposits on StarkNet directly. And yeah, they're going to be more and more of our roadmap, but due to just like scaling and I guess technological limitations, that's our use of them right now and how our order book system works.
Got it. Makes sense. Yeah, I think a lot of this technical background is very interesting, and I think at the same time, the interface makes it so that the user doesn't need to know kind of all the underpinnings. Having kind of played around with it a little bit, works pretty smoothly in my opinion, and yeah, user doesn't need to know all the details, but they can certainly find out if they're curious.
Yeah, totally. Nothing, everything totally clear, and happy to share this publicly. We have shared it public. I've tweeted on this, our docs and stuff. We've commented on that in the Discord. And part of like what we really want to do and sort of the messaging that we've been pushing is like, no trade-offs. Like a lot of the Web3 usage is sort of clunky, right? It feels like you're using DeFi. It doesn't feel like you're using a polished TD Ameritrade, Fidelity style system. It's just a little clunky sometimes. Our UI is really smooth. Like it's really aesthetic. It's pretty. Like we've modeled it after these interfaces that just work and are attractive to use. And when you use us, I don't think that it feels like you're using a Web3 product. It kind of feels like you're using a broker, like an interface that feels like a Web2 creation. So, we want to bridge that gap and make that experience smooth and, actually a pleasure to trade on stuff.
Cool. I didn't really have any specific questions about Rabbit. Maybe I just have some wrap up kind of questions, but we're also happy to just talk about anything that's on your mind right now, or if George has anything else he wants to ask.
I have a question about you mentioned that Forex and commodities are coming soon. I think that's very exciting because I'm not aware of other platforms that kind of cross over into non-crypto native assets. And yeah, I'm just curious if you can speak more to that, and also how you guys are able to get kind of accurate pricing information for these products.
So yeah, that is part of our phase 2. And we have a roadmap page that kind of like lays out like, what we're looking to accomplish over time. And part of that phase 2 is global markets. And by that, Forex, commodities, interest rates are also something. Interest rate swaps are things we want to bring on as well. The technological component of that is a little TBD. I'm like, on the content research community side so much. So I'm not our CTO, but I would suffice to say, I'm going to kind of confidently hazard a guess that an Oracle will be used to relay that, probably Chainlink among others, to just give us accurate pricing information to then, give that derivative a presence on chain and let you trade it with Rabbit. But yeah, no, we full on want to, like, our goal near term are DeFi users and crypto users, right? But we want like, that's not our end objective. That's kind of like the early adopters. And, we want to be a real place where like whales or institutions come on chain to trade serious markets. So, I mean, our ambitions are that aggressive. And yeah, it's phase 2 would include those markets as well as like other things like, staking and what have you for our new token RBX. And yeah, as much as I can comment on that now, an Oracle would probably be how we would bring that information on chain.
Yeah, very cool stuff. Yeah, we're definitely looking forward to seeing you guys progress, adding more assets, both crypto native and also the quote unquote real world assets.
Yeah, I know, right?
Yeah, so as Kevin was saying, yeah, maybe we transition on and yeah, is there other general stuff you're working on outside of Rabbit? Maybe your next thread or analysis on crypto markets generally, or anything else anything on your mind you want to talk about outside of what we've discussed?
So yeah, always kind of ideating and working on content. I have a couple pieces in the pipeline. Generations of War and Crypto Part 4 is mostly done. I kind of have to go through and edit and refine that. I also have some other pieces that are like standalone ones being worked on. AI is, this sounds a little trite to say it's interesting because obviously everyone finds it interesting, but I think it's interesting in a way that's very like symbiotic and antagonistic with crypto in a way that, I kind of view it as like an evolutionary extension of like, I view both of them as like an evolutionary extension of like human cognition in a way that competes to like maintain homeostasis. And I've kind of written on this before where it's like calling AI is artificial abundance, crypto is artificial scarcity. And that AI, saturates the world in a deluge of content, right? Everyone can write an essay immediately with ChatGPT or spin up a thread or whatever you want, basically. And it's easy to just, saturate the world and just whatever you want to make with AI, graphics too, deep fakes, whatever you name it. And crypto is like a interesting way to like constrain that. Cryptographically signing things, and not cryptocurrency, like cryptography, is almost something like that seems to be an evolutionary component to keep that in check. Again, to like maintain homeostasis in a way, like viewing these two things as like part of a biological entity. It's really interesting how much they sort of contrast and symbiotically kind of maintain this state of like advancing, but also not letting one get too out of hand. And cryptography letting you navigate all this new content and information. I could sign things I create as my own cryptographically, so they're from me. Crypto's done a great job creating artificial scarcity for Ethereum, Bitcoin, etc. Right? There's no like physics reason why there couldn't be a trillion Bitcoins. It's the contracts on chain, the cryptography that protects them, and then the networks that we've created that reinforce those laws, so to speak. And just AI seems to be like this way that just competes with it really interestingly. So like I love watching these two things develop. And it's kind of interesting to me. They're also like roughly at the same stage of gestation in a way. Like they're starting to permeate the public mindset. Everyone knows kind of what ChatGPT is now, even like a normie or your, maybe your mom who isn't really tech oriented. She's at least heard the name. Same way as she's heard of like crypto now and certain basic things like that. Neither are like fully scaled yet, right? Like ChatGPT still has downtime. We don't really have the GPU capacity needed to like fully maximize this, but we can see where it's headed. These things aren't perfected yet, right? Mid-Journey sometimes spits out images with funky fingers. ChatGPT still hallucinates and just spits out nonsense that it doesn't know. Crypto scaling is still kind of a little clunky sometimes. It's not perfect. Gas is sometimes way too expensive. There are still hacks that happen all the time, right? Like the tech is there and it works, but it's deeply imperfect, but we know we're going to fix that, right? It's both of these things feel like in a very similar plane in terms of their development. And I feel like they're going to stay on that plane because I think like they're fundamentally these two creations that are built to, again, maintain homeostasis. So that's like a thought of mine and something that I've written on before, and I'll probably keep writing on in some respect. So yeah.
Just a quick comment on like the areas like the fingers don't work really well, or the gas. I feel like those acute descriptions of the problems are actually a reflection of how well everything else works, right? That allows us to point out a very specific problem. So that's just kind of one kind of thought I had. And then I think the maintenance of homeostasis like is a very interesting way of looking at things, because yeah, I think that with AI you can generate these images, these texts, and generally content, right? It's almost a hyperinflation of content. whereas crypto is that kind of scarcity and value. And yeah, I think that I haven't kind of completely digested kind of how to look at these two different topics. But yeah, I think that's a very interesting take.
Yeah, yeah. So, and I think AI is going to come under the same. I mean, I fully expect crypto to be attacked for a lot of the reasons the warfare threads get into, just because it represents a reduction of power for the US. And I don't think that's something that will be ever be taken favorably. That's why I don't think it's fundamentally a legal argument or a legal approach. I think it's a game theory approach based off of how low intensity warfare operates, because the legal stuff is all just going to be post hoc justification for actions they want to take anyway. So that's why I kind of just view it as like, we don't need to analyze, like, I jokingly say the Wooden Canoe Act of 1819 on how they're viewing it with stablecoins. Like, it's like whatever, like they're going to do what they want to do. And
Yeah.
they're going to come up with every justification they can, because that's what lawyers do. They're good, they're verbal. That's just the games they play. And I also think AI is going to be attacked for very similar reasons, for what it does to like the laptop class, the white collar class. It's gonna, it's gonna really bring a wrecking ball to work, especially technology work, which is actually really highly paid work historically. And that's going to be rough. I think it will probably usher in some form of UBI being more very seriously kind of approached in the US and otherwise, because I don't people have to be employed, like they need jobs, and if they don't need to be literally employed, I think it'll require things like that. But in the interim, before we get there, because of that creative destruction it brings, it has an immense amount of creative destruction. You should absolutely expect it to be attacked by, in the way it's kind of already being attacked, like how you see with Eliza Yudowski and Roku and these guys, like talking about Terminator style things, with how it's dangerous and needs to be limited. Like, yeah, it's going to be AI is going to be maligned as dangerous the same way crypto is maligned as being a tool for criminals, right? And I just think it's very, very clear that that's going to happen, because, again, not because that's true, but because what happens as this thing manifests, a lot of rich people or well-off people who work in government jobs, or are their jobs are sending emails, they're not going to they're going to lose those jobs. So you should expect that class of people to fight that very hard. And it's not going to be for intellectually genuine reasons about danger or the AI is not safe. It's going to be for that. So just prepare accordingly. The same way crypto is going to experience a lot of problems, because it changes what it means to sanction a country. It changes what KYC and collecting taxes means. That's a big deal. So that's the reason why it's going to be attacked. And I don't care what official reason you give me. That's why I'm just like, whatever the reason is. I don't need to read the headline of like what Elizabeth Warren said, or what people who are pro bank said. Like, I know they're going to attack it because I know that's what it does. And I feel like AI is going to undergo the same kind of onslaught for the creative destruction it brings. So that's another way where they have a lot of parallels. I also think they're going to endure a lot of slander and fear mongering and stuff like that because of what the tech inherently does.
Yeah, I mean, to that point, you're also an investor in tech stocks. And today, I think Chegg's stock fell something like 40% because they publicly admitted that users were leaving the service because of AI, which I think is interesting. And also, just one recommendation, kind of on your point about homeostasis and the balance between AI and crypto. There's a yin yang kind of element to it. I'm reminded of Kevin Kelly's book, What Technology Wants, which if you haven't read yet, would highly recommend. And he basically studies technology as if it were a biological organism, and kind of says, well, if technology were this living sentient thing, what does it want? And I find that to be very kind of useful framework for thinking about what's going on in the world today.
Interesting. I've never heard of this. Like, yeah, that's really analogous to what I just said. Yeah, that was my own thought too, but this I'm Googling it right now. I've never heard of this book. I love that metaphor. I really agree with like the description you just said. This sounds interesting. I'll look into this more.
Yeah, I highly recommend it. And if you want an abbreviated version, I think Preston Pish just did an interview with Kevin Kelly on their podcast. like it came out maybe today or a few days ago, and it was also they covered some of that. And Preston was a big What Technology Wants fan, so
Okay, I'll find that. Yeah, I got a huge podcast list. Preston might be on there. Yeah, I'm subbed to like maybe like 40 podcasts, and I just go through the queue of what gets published and what kind of strikes my fancy, you know. I'll find that though. I'm gonna put that in the notes right now.
sounds good. Maybe we can talk about it in a future update when you come back on.
Yeah, I'd love that.
Well, I mean, I'm pretty good. I've got more questions, but I think that's probably a good kind of point to wrap up. If there's anything lastly that you wanted to share with our audience, please do. Tell us where to follow you, where to find you, all of that good stuff.
Yeah, totally. So BackTheBunny on Twitter, which is at BackTheBunny, all one word, is where you can find like all my writings and comments and just like day-to-day things. I'm very online, and that avenue, like Twitter, is just an incredibly powerful tool. And if you curate it properly, I think it's just one of the most uniquely informative and just yeah, I get why Elon, I think Elon, even at $44 billion, I actually think he made a good buy. Over time anyways. So I'm really big on there. That's where I usually publish everything first, is on Twitter. And then on the RabbitX blog, which is that's also, and it's in the Twitter profile. I publish my writings in there as well. And you can sub to that and get an email update every time I publish something new there, or follow on Twitter and read it as I thread it out there. In our Discord, you can interact with me and the whole team in there. We're in there all the time. Ming, our CEO, Chang, our COO, our community, our awesome community manager, Angle, myself, among others. Like, we're very attentive to what traders and people say in there and implement suggestions all the time. And, RabbitX, hey, if you're a perps trader or a derivatives trader at all, you want to put on any kind of leverage directional bet, we go up to 20 times leverage. We're a great place to, we're a great place to do it structurally. We have no gas trading. We have the cheapest fees in the space. If you're trading with maker orders, we have no fees. And yeah, come check us out. I think we'll be a very useful tool for derivatives traders in DeFi and beyond. And yeah, go follow on Twitter, stay up to date there, jump into Discord. Happy to talk with anyone, and keep an eye on Rabbit.
Awesome. Thank you so much for coming on. It's really been an honor and a pleasure, learned a ton. So thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you guys so much for inviting me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, great speaking with you, man.
Same.
Okay, have a good day.